All right, the Dossier Podcast is back. This is Jordan Schachtel, your host, the publisher of the Dossier. You can find us on dossier.today or dossier.substack.com. Today we have a really cool guest that aligns really well with what we've been reporting and writing about at the Dossier. And he's Josh Abbotoy. He's a partner at New Founding, which is a really cool organization that is kind of enacting its own, cultural rebellion against the Biden administration and just like the general woke left and Wall Street corporate policies that we're being inundated with today in the United States. Josh also has a really cool project called Ridge Runner, which is also, I think, affiliated with New Founding, which is this. There's kind of like these local pockets of pioneering venture capitalists and people who want to kind of build their own citadels in a sense to get away from the craziness of American bureaucratic corporate society, getting away from the pod life. Although I participate a little bit in the pod life in South Florida, it's it's refreshing to see that there's people and there's venture firms that are willing to provide other options, not just in employment, but in family and community. Josh, it's really good having you on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about New Founding? Because you guys kind of came onto the scene only a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, we were founded back in 2021. I joined in 21 from a private equity background. Nate Fisher's the founder over here. And we've always been a venture and media company. So, we built some media brands and sold them to the Blaze back in 23 in the summer. And we've been doing a lot of deals on our own. And then actually in late August, we launched a venture fund. So we're now investing in a lot of companies and startups. And, we've got our fingers in a lot of pies. We're investors and we're trying to tap into some pretty seismic changes that are happening in American society that, we all personally believe are good for the country. And we also think that a lot of people are going to be able to make a living in this space as well. So, one of the big needs on the venture side is that, the ideological capture of the Fortune 500 and all of that has created opportunities everywhere for entrepreneurs and innovators. And, we can start with a really simple example. Everybody knows if you run a company or maybe you run an organization that's a little bit conservative, too far right of center, you're at severe cancellation risk from this whole stack of companies that you really need to be able to use in order to run a business. MailChimp and Salesforce, and there are companies that will turn organizations off if those organizations cross certain lines. And, at the same time, everybody knows about ESG and the way that capital gets allocated now. It's oftentimes irrational. There's good companies that have trouble getting capital because they're in a disfavored sector. So you can look around and find opportunity everywhere. It's all really relates to the fact that a lot of the people with money in this country have huge blind spots, and they miss ideological blind spots because they're in cocooned communities, and so they miss opportunities. And so we hope that with what we're doing, we have an opportunity to invest and make money, create companies that serve people that people want. And so that's really what we're doing at a 10,000 foot level. Real estate's an example of that. So what's the blind spot? A ton of people in this country want to relocate to rural areas, and that is a very politicized movement. According to statistics I've seen, about 5 or 6 million people have moved since COVID, and 20 million still want to. Of that 20 million, a majority want to move to a rural area. People who want to move to a rural area are overwhelmingly conservative. The politics of wanting to live in a city versus a rural area are almost diametrically flipped. And that's increased over time. It didn't used to be the case. But as of today, there's never been a bigger measured gap between who wants to move to the country versus who wants to move to the city. And why do they do that? Shows up in polling data. Like this isn't, right-wing speculation. This is secular knowledge. They're increasingly citing political and cultural factors in that decision-making process. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you're a right of center white collar worker at a bank or something, some big institution in a city, and it's gotten ideologically captured, all of a sudden you're less loyal to the institution. And then you start thinking, man, I've been making all these hard life sacrifices for this institution. And what have I gotten for it? It's not meritocratic. Can I rise through the ranks there? Do I even think it's like good for the world, what they're doing? Increasingly people are saying no. And then when they say that, then they start thinking about, well, I want more sovereignty over my own economic affairs. I'll join a smaller shop where I have more influence. I'll go out on my own and start my own thing. And then when people start thinking that, they also start thinking about agency in their civic life and their community. And, I'm currently in Dallas, which is a better city than most cities, but to varying degrees, all of these cities are ideologically captured by the Democratic Party, and conservative people don't really have a realistic path towards exercising real civic leadership in the city. And so then when you cast your eyes to a small town, you start to envision a life where you and your friends are running great, successful, innovative businesses. It's a small town, and the people there share your values, so you can get involved in civic and cultural life. People across the country are starting to feel that itch. And what Ridge Runner did, that started a couple years back, and it was just sort of a recognition of the fact that demand was there. And so we were going to try to intentionally reach that kind of person, and bring them out. I'm a native of Appalachia. I own land there myself. I will be moving there. So I know the area really, really well, and it's already kind of gentrifying. People want what it has. It has an authentic connection to the old American way of life, folk ways. Like people still talk in a way that's similar to the way they talked 150 years ago or 200 years ago. They know how to farm. A lot of these things have remained the same for a long time. And so it's very powerful and evocative. And a lot of people who have spent their lives chasing jobs and living in cities that are all kind of globally homogenized really feel the draw when they get to experience it. So.
Yeah, no, I find it such a fascinating idea. I come from a Jewish background, and those of us who are observant, we spend Shabbat, basically the weekend, basically completely offline, and it kind of it automatically kind of drives you into this sense of community. And of course, Jews who are religious need to live within proximity to a religious institution that they can walk to, because we can't drive on the weekends. And you don't really understand how nice it is until you've experienced something like that. And this sense that like just everyone around you is part of this like community, part of this extended family, and it makes life just so much more grounded than just a lot of people who are living these crazy lives in urban centers and 70-story buildings. And it's just so dehumanizing. This idea that the kind of meme that you're seeing on social media, that more people need to touch grass, I think that really relates to what's going on in the West today. But yeah, I think like it's very interesting what you guys are doing at New Founding, and it's very encouraging, because you're right. Like everyone has friends and family in these major corporations, and although you never know it through the corporate media's reporting lens and how they viciously attack you guys, it's so the corporate culture is so far to the left today that we have major organizations providing funding for transgender surgeries, but God forbid you express your support for or you like if you're found at the March for Life or something like that, it's cause for basically being blacklisted from every major organization. So we have like this centralization on Wall Street. So it seems that at least in today's environment, one of the few ways to overcome that is to have responsible venture capitalists who are willing to put their money where their mouth is and take risks. Of course, it's definitely an uphill battle. As you've seen, like you guys, there's like these crazy articles in the Guardian and even the Daily Mail, and it's funny, these are both British papers, and I got a kick out of how they reported on the Highland Rim Ridge Runner project, that they are basically smearing you, because like it's such a foreign concept to the Europeans that people would want to own a lot of land and do what they want with it. It's just also fascinating to me. But I looked on the Ridge Runner website, and it's very cool. Like I think the plots of land that you acquired are gorgeous, and I definitely wish you guys the best. But have you found that when you're trying to, have you reached out to, I guess, the normies and tried to bring them on board? Like, what's that experience like with people, with like other venture capitalists who haven't, like, how do you kind of recruit them into the new founding type of network? Because like the incentive structure still remains true to the ESG, DEI, woke craziness.
So I won't mention names, but there are people in some big firms who understand that the ideological capture is bad for business and bad for the country. And so we do, on the venture side, we do have a number of people, names that folks would know, who are supportive, and they see the opportunity. And there's still a lot of good capitalists in this country who like to make money, and a lot of them have gone along with ESG and DEI because those are external conditions that are imposed upon them, and they just want to keep their businesses running, keep the capital flowing, and so they're not going to fight, but they're skeptical, and I think some at least understand like that there's actually an economic opportunity that's created by the sort of irrationality of the Fortune 500 and the major capital allocators. So we see that. We want more of it. We work at that every day. That's essential, because we need, in the financial industry, if you really want to change it, you need scale. We've got essentially three viable large asset managers: Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street, and they manage almost all state public funding, and part of the reason that they're hard to compete with, they're so big, they get just ridiculous economy of scale. So these startup alternative asset managers, they have far less under management, so their fees need to be higher, just to be able to pay their bills and their salaries. And so when states go out to bid on who's going to be the asset manager for our state, even if they have reservations about the way that BlackRock handles their money, it's pretty hard to tell voters, or like teachers, people who depend upon the performance of the portfolio, yeah, sorry, we went with this other product that costs 0.2% more, just because it's more ideologically aligned with our state. Like that issue needs to be solved. It needs to be done, but it has to happen at a really big scale, especially in the public equities. Now, fortunately, what we're doing is more amenable to small, disruptive, nimble startups. We're a venture firm. Out of our venture fund, the average check that we cut is $250K or $500K, so very modest investments, and we can do a lot, I think, to change corporate culture and create great companies without having to have that massive scale. But we're also, we aspire to grow, and getting to the next level is getting to the point where, where you have some big partnerships and some big players that can instill the confidence necessary to get access to the really big institutional capital. So, this is all, it's a problem that a lot of good people are working on from different angles. And I am confident will be solved. All of that, forming these credible alternative investment firms. Some of them will succeed and make a lot of money, but also doing that moderates the behavior of the big players too. So it's hopefully long term it will be helpful for the kind of corporate insanity that we have right now.
Mm-hmm. So for the land project, is this kind of what you're rolling out? You want to see if this is going to be a proof of concept? Because I'm not familiar with any other projects that are actually, I mean, you mentioned that you're not super far along, but you own the land, right? So it's like that's beyond what the vast majority of people who've created these mission kind of driven organizations. So it seems like you're actively working on the project. What how do you kind of envision not necessarily the community in Appalachia, but what do you have kind of like a rubric for what you think will work and what can attract 2,000 or 1,000 families, say, to move into all of these really nice plots of land. It's amazing when I was on you forget sometimes that America is such a vast country, and although BlackRock and Bill Gates own so much of our land, the idea that we have like a population issue is just it's madness to me. And I think that it's part of like the value structure of the the people opposing the regime is actually like there's so much land out here, and like we don't need to be boxed into these all of these just like coastal or urban centers in Texas if we're right wingers. Like we can really create. There's really nothing stopping us today. I think you mentioned it briefly on the new founding site. Like, hey, we have access to partially thanks to Elon Musk. We have access to really fast broadband, and these communities, like the knowledge is there. People know how to build stuff from the ground up in a relatively short period of time. So what's stopping communities of people from coming together? And do you see this kind of like as a proof of concept moving forward?
Yes. So yeah, absolutely. And this one is a very high conviction proof of concept. So we've got some Kentucky property already. It's on the Ridge Runner website, ridgerunnerusa.com. What I announced with new founding is a substantial expansion of that project, and that's based on that's in response to demand that we've seen, and I will say what we're doing right now is we're studying everything about the demand. We know it's there, but we're getting granular about like who are these people, where are they coming from, what do they want, and how can we help create that? You do have to. It's a collective action problem, which means like most people who live in the city, they don't want to be the first person to move out into the middle of nowhere. You have no friends, and it's all on you to build a good life for yourself and then try to get other people to join you. But if you've got organizations that know how to kind of solve that collective action problem by getting critical mass together, by helping to recruit, like churches, schools, businesses that are attractive and appealing, like grass-fed beef farms, that kind of thing. If you can get, you need to bring all of that together, really, to solve the collective action problem. So that when somebody thinks about it, they're not just daunted by this is a blank slate in a vast wilderness, and I'm just one person, but rather this is happening and it's going to be awesome, and I want to jump in to help shape the direction that it takes. So, it's we were slandered in The Guardian and all of that, right? I mean, you saw that they really don't like the project. They don't understand it at all. What we're doing is, I think providing a bridge to a life that people really want to live in cities, especially people with kids, people who tend to be more religiously conservative. This is mainly Christians. They really want this. Look, I will say on the flip side, as a native of Appalachia and in any other region we go into, there's a protective aspect to this. There's an aspect of defending and standing up for people in these regions, because we're not going to let Appalachia get terraformed by liberals.
Mm-hmm.
And the way of life there is precious. It's an old American way of life. They're good people, and they're not going to get displaced, and their downtown isn't going to get taken over with rainbow flags. What we want to do is guide the process of bringing people there that will help them, like their community and that area, like, grow into the rest of the century in a really healthy way that's good for everyone. And so that's like the frustrating thing about folks like The Guardian is it's like the malice that is sort of required to search the internet for some tiny little project and decide that you've got to make it international news. I mean, we're talking, we've like deployed a couple $1 million to date, like this is nothing. I mean, but it's a new idea that they haven't encountered before. And it creates worry and fear, I guess, in their readers, and they want to read about it, because I think it's just a potent idea, which makes me really happy. I feel like we're over target. And, on the flip side, I mean, we've got hundreds and hundreds of people reaching out. The median person is like a white collar worker in Silicon Valley, has a good income, wants to buy $1 million house, conservative, religious. That's really affirming for me and what we're doing. And the only thing I'd say is, like, all these negative hit pieces were just too early. Like, they should have come out a year from now. We'll give them a much better story 1 year from now than we have for them today.
Yeah, no, I think that, I generally subscribe to the idea that all press is good press, especially for developing organizations. So, there's plenty of conservatives who read the Daily Mail and the Guardian, probably in ghost mode, but they still read it. And then they're going to click on your website and say, like, hey, wow, this is kind of amazing. I remember, I spent a lot of time in the DC area, and I would always love getting away, driving down to like Southwest Virginia and just going to these small towns, looking at the main streets. Just it's such a relief the way that people live their lives out there. And it's becoming less and less important to be surrounded by 8 million people at all times. It's not really necessary at all today. And kind of like pivoting to the tech front. So the concern that I see in like these parallel projects, specifically in tech, is that for whatever reason, us, conservatives, libertarians, freedom prioritizing people, it seems that we don't have the roster of individuals who are technically sound, good at aesthetics. And a lot of our projects that are designed as parallel economy projects are like knockoffs of Twitter/X, knockoffs of Amazon, knockoffs of Amazon Web Services. And it seems to be that there's not enough genuine innovation. I mean, creating bootlegs is a very temporary solution to me. And that's what I'm seeing inundating the right today. So have you thought about that issue at all?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's something we've thought about from day one, being together as a group. There's a big grifter problem. There's a lot of people who are effective salesmen who go, essentially, rather than going to investors to raise money for their company, they go to political donors and raise investments for their company that way, on kind of, based on sort of political conviction only. And that's a big reason why there's a lot of bad companies that pop up, and they do get a lot of media coverage, and they're flashes in the pan. But there are a lot of really credible people, and that see what we're seeing and want to fix it. And one of the big things is you're not going to find them at Trump rallies. You're not going to find them posting under their own name on Twitter. They're suits usually, because most of them, like a lot of them, are working in big companies. So you've got to find a way to put out a bat signal to based people in big corporations where they can like confidentially start getting connected and everything. And so we've done a lot of that. We have this one of the things we do is a talent network, which, it sounds like a small, modest thing. It's blown up, and, we're like putting resources into it and doing a lot of placements, but it's all these people who are in Fortune 500s, extremely credible professionals who they're ready to take pay cuts, take big professional risks, and really change their life around just because they've lost confidence in the organizations that they're in. They don't find those conditions tolerable anymore. And what that means is again, it just plays into the fact that there's actually opportunity here, because like if you're a credible founder and you need to get a C-suite and your business is a credible business, you can have your pick of really, really good talent, people who would not take a look at you otherwise. So this is an opportunity. It's got to be stewarded. We only try to do business with people that are competent and know how to execute. And fortunately, we're finding more and more of those people, and more of them are in this space, with under their own names. I don't know if there's people like Josh Steinman. I don't know if you talked to him much, but he does a fair bit of venture. He's got a startup himself. Very competent guy in this space that we see on deals and such. There's these networks forming that are going to, I think, create a next generation of very good companies that are going to meet that, maybe you call it parallel economy 2.0, but I don't even want to say that, because these aren't companies that just want to be parallel economy. They want to be category disruptors and become the best in the world at what they do. But in a lot of cases, they will have early adopters who are conservatives. But that just helps them get from 0 to 1, and then their ambition is to become great.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the way you framed that, because I think that the problem begins at the beginning when these founders create something that's specifically designed as an alternative to this, and that's basically, you can't get beyond, if you're trying to build an alternative to Twitter, you're never going to get beyond what Twitter is today. So I think you're right. We need people even more ambitious and more original, who can access a different pool than just investors. And I think this is a huge problem on the right, that people there's a strategy to getting a huge ROI in a short term, and that's what these people seem to prioritize, the bootleggers. It's really unfortunate, because people, most people have never been in the investment space, and they're just trying to genuinely support movements that oppose what's going on in corporate America. But it's crazy to see, and that's encouraging to me, because you look at a company like Boeing. They're neck deep in DEI ESG, that now doors are blowing off of their planes. It's crazy to me that someone needs to stop this thing before it causes even more carnage. And I think it's only a matter of time. I had another guest on yesterday. We were talking about Apple, and how Apple's kind of one of those companies. Every company needs to at least somewhat embrace it. They're all creating DEI departments, but it's at what level do they decide to destroy themselves? And of course, this leads to a problem of a lack of innovation. Have you seen it's interesting, I'm 34 and grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, where you had all of these technological revolutions happening in the pre-DEI ESG era, and I felt like the pace of technological progress was so rapid. And now today we have stuff like ChatGPT and so-called AI, but it just seems that there's definitely it's not happening at the pace it used to. Do you attribute that to the craziness that's happening in corporate America today, the bureaucratization and all that?
Yeah. Two things. I do think that tech took a inward, uninspiring turn. Innovation has happened on the smartphone, and Chat GPT. I mean, that is amazing technology. There's an innovation to that. That's the result of a lot of hard work and hard thinking. But it's all turned into this, just making computers faster, smaller, more capable. And I think that's sort of running out. So that's sort of a secular trend, right? That's not necessarily a political thing. But then, yes, I do think the ideological capture of these companies has just kneecapped their competence. And this is another thing I want to touch on, but the competence crisis you'll hear about, this is sort of separate from the DEI issues, but it's related. But the generation coming up is less competent in a lot of ways, and a lot of big companies are being held together and being held back from disaster because there's that old cranky boomer on the team who I will not sign off on this until you get it right. I will not sign off on this project, and when those guys retire, a lot of the younger generation is just not there. And you could talk about the reasons for why, and some of it goes back to education, I think, and DEI, because educational standards have been weakened and sort of attacked again because of DEI and wokeness. The bar has essentially just been lowered for everyone. We're not a culture that really seriously values excellence anymore. It's like the primary virtue in the way that we train people. And that just shows, I mean, even, just across the spectrum, everybody's less, Harvard grads are less competent than they used to be 20 years ago or 50 years ago. So that's a big problem too. But then, of course, but that's a problem that's intrinsically related to wokeness, I think.
Mm. Yeah, so this morning I was, I'm a big Bitcoiner, so I think it's interesting that these big institutions like BlackRock have finally embraced Bitcoin as a means to at least attract investment from their perspective. And I'm sure, as a VC and someone that's been in the space for a while, you're keenly aware of like you were talking about earlier, the problem having access to woke capital specifically, and that kind of connects to monetary policy. Are you encouraged by movements, connected to Bitcoin and other forms of kind of financial independence, revolting against CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, in all these states, where all these state governors seem to be taking this issue pretty seriously? This idea of monetary independence. Are you? Does that give you some hope?
Oh yeah. I mean, and well, hope, and also I don't say this is a bad thing, but the ability to control currency and having a political entity, having a polity, are inextricably linked. So, the Roman Empire, what was that? But to a large degree, it was roads, protection, currency, and when the empire starts to have issues, currency degradation is one of the first ones to rear its head, and people start rethinking their relationship with the empire when they don't get the goods that you're supposed to get by being in the empire. So it's a really meaningful thing. That's why the government hates it so much, because the dollar, and we had such a great deal for the longest time with the dollar, because we could, and it's related to the fact that we control the globe essentially militarily, but we could print a ton of money, run big deficits, and export the inflation. So the inflationary effects are felt across the world, but the money that we print is spent in the States. So there's an asymmetry there. The dollar could defy gravity. Greece can't print its way out of a debt problem because nobody uses their currency except for Greece. Everybody had to use our currency for major global transactions and everything. And this is why, even the most recent events, it was very foreseeable that the sanctions on Russia were followed by steep inflation in the States, because the sanctions on Russia furthered the formation of the BRICS payment system, which means all these billion-dollar transactions are happening in some currency that's not the dollar, and there's less demand for the dollar now. Okay, so that's the whole background. So I guess I would say I am excited. I mean, I think it's the excessive inflation is unjust for people. Like it's actually just wrong. Like if you own assets, it can be really good. Like people who owned land and stocks, like they've probably had a great 3 or 4 year run, but it's really bad for most of the country. And so Bitcoin is, I mean, it's amazing the potential it has from that perspective. But I get why it threatens the government a lot, and it's going to be an existential fight. I mean, if Bitcoin wins, the government that we have is a significantly smaller and weaker one than what we have right now. And one other point I just want to say on crypto, though, again, with like the most exciting thing about crypto to me is sort of the Web 3.0 applications that crypto can have. And that one currently, I mean, gratefully, there's a lot of fighting going on. I hope under a Trump administration, there's significant regulatory improvement. But the SEC has completely bungled and completely killed innovation in crypto because they've been so opaque about the regulatory status. Nobody knows. You want to go launch a new coin? Does that mean you have to file for an IPO? Nobody really knows today. And it's just absurd. It's crushing innovation. So for any Republican administration, it's got to be a top priority that we allow innovation in the crypto space without the SEC breathing down everybody's neck.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look into the background of these federal agencies, and the name on them, they claim to be protecting consumers, or whether it's the SEC protecting consumers, or when it's these pharmaceutical regulation organizations, this idea that they're captured by these very powerful corporate lobbyists and institutions is a very real thing. Like you look at the history of Sam Bankman-Fried was meeting with the all these top commissioners right before he got thrown into the slammer, and that they're so corrupted. And don't even get me started on the pharma stuff. But it's interesting that you brought up the early Greeks and Romans, and I think that one of the interesting things was, if you look at Caesar and the coinage that was issued when he was emperor, it kind of like speaks to the the dissolution of a society, because like as he got older and fatter, they kept clipping the coins. So like you can look at like a Caesar gold coin from the beginning of his reign to the end, and at the end, like it's worthless and he's fat, and at the beginning he's like healthy and it's not diluted at all. So but I saw that you were on I watched a couple of podcasts before coming on the show, and I didn't realize that you have an advanced education in Byzantine history. So if you'd like, we could leave this the last question. Do you have any interesting parallels or fun facts about your studies that you think relates to America today?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that I would say, for Americans who feel maybe down about the direction of our country, I would just say that the Byzantines, they were the Eastern. They didn't call themselves the Byzantines; they called themselves Romans. And Rome fell; it was sacked. All of this stuff, and they carried on a tradition for 1,000 years. And of course they fell. Every single empire and polity has fallen throughout history, like newsflash. But they were an incredibly successful civilization, and they transmitted like most of the classical world to us today. So we can thank them for that. And a lot of their buildings like still stand in Turkey, although Turkey's dictator is doing everything he can to destroy their stuff, which is horrible. But they were just a wildly successful civilization. So I guess I would say like the during a lot of time of uncertainty and and change and shift, like I don't know what the future holds. I mean, also I guess apparently we may be in the middle of a civil war down here in Texas. Things are getting reshuffled, and at a minimum I think it's probably safe to say we expect America to stop being a global empire, And then, what does that mean for us domestically? Like, we don't know yet really, but that's coming. It's probably happening. And, like I would just say in the midst of all of that, we still need like ambitious people building, going out and doing things. You don't want to get mired in nostalgia, which is going to set you up for failure. You've got to have your eyes on the future and continue to build, but with clear eyes, like understanding, like we're not, like it's not just America's not just going to be like it was in the 90s forever. Like that's not a future that's on offer. But at a minimum, you gotta do what you can in your control to make the country a better place and carve out a space for yourself and people that you love. And so that would be my takeaway. They had a great run, and and I think we can too.
Yeah, no, it's interesting when you think of the American exceptionalism, and our foundations were exceptional. But to remain exceptional, it can't just be, telling stories about our past. It needs to be an active effort. But Josh, really appreciate your time. Anywhere you want to send the audience in terms of your latest work and whatnot, or where to follow you?
Best way to keep up with me is on Twitter @Byzness. That's BYZNESS.
Nice. All right. Appreciate your time so much.
All right. Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks.